If you are a startup founder trying to raise funds, let me tell you something brutally honest, which most people won't. It's not about how good your idea is, it's not about how big your TAM is, and it's definitely not about your pitch deck design. Because I've seen founders with none of these raise tens of crores of funds in just 3 months, and others with the above three get completely ghosted. So you might be wondering what's going on. Most founders don't get funded because they're playing the wrong game. They are following the same 2021 advice: copy random decks, focus on aesthetic, miscalculate their TAM, or think that their idea is the best thing since sliced bread. And after 3 months of chasing VCs, they burn out, or worse, they don't even know what went wrong. They might be thinking, what's wrong with them? Why are they not able to raise funds where they are seeing other companies raise 10 CR, 100 CR, or more so effortlessly? And the media will do a great job of reinforcing that fact to you. But the real truth is that fundraising isn't about chasing investors. It's about positioning yourself as the bet that they cannot afford to miss. Now, let me repeat that again. Position yourself as the bet that the investors cannot afford to miss. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you a system that countless founders have used to raise their first or the next round, even when they thought it was completely impossible. It doesn't require any fancy pitch decks, you don't need to pitch to random investors, and worse, you don't even need to plead investors for funds. Hello, my name is Harshetia. I am the founder of GTM Ventures. And if you're wondering why I care so much about fundraising, it's because I've lived the founder struggle myself. I was the founder of one of the first online diagnostic companies in India back in 2017. I was inspired by PharmEasy, which was opened by one of the seniors of my B school, and seeing the progress that they had made, I was inspired to start one of the first online diagnostic companies back in the day. Now, I have pitched to renowned investors like Sanjay Mehta, Urias Venture Partners, Matrix Ventures, and got rejected by them all. I've sat through investor meetings where the investors simply stared at their phones, simply scrolling through, but they were too polite and did not say no upfront. I've sent 87 cold LinkedIn DMs and got just one reply, and even that was a polite not a fit. I've spent countless nights wondering if I was just building a business no one believed in. I've gone through the entire struggles during my founder journey, which most likely you are going through as well right now. I was ghosted, rejected, ignored. Eventually, I had to shut down my startup during COVID due to lack of funds. And then I decided to join the other side of the table and start helping startups raise capital so that they don't have to go through the same heartbreak which I did. And that was when I realized how investors truly think. Because now I was truly on the inside and had evaluated thousands of pitch decks, worked with dozens of businesses to raise capital, and interacted with hundreds of investors. And everything changed when I stopped trying to impress investors and started thinking like them. Instead of trying to appease to them, I understood what their psychology was, and now I knew exactly what they required in a portfolio company to invest in. And that's when I realized that fundraising isn't just a numbers game. It's a game of positioning, it's a game of showing opportunity, and more importantly, reaching out to the right investors, especially in 2025 where funding is so scarce and investors have been pickier than ever. Fundraising is supposed to be the fuel, it is the oxygen to grow your business. Fundraising is not the end goal. Fundraising is not the Olympics gold. The Olympics goal is building a successful business and hopefully taking it to the IPO. That's the final destination. Fundraising is supposed to be the initial help that you need along the way so that you reach the journey of the Olympic gold, which is the IPO at the end. So remember, fundraising, it's not a milestone, it's a game of perception, positioning, and timing so that you can get the fuel, the oxygen for your business. And that is the gap which I help founders close. I don't just give you random pitch deck tips or send you a Google sheet of investors. And the worst thing that you could do is cold spam the investors with no context, nothing, and just spam them through cold email. That is absolutely worst. I'll hand you a new vehicle, one that will get you from idea or MVP stage all the way to money in the bank with clarity, confidence, and control. It's a complete system which has been completely effective and has been used by so many founders to raise funds for their business, designed to make your startup into an investable proposition and not something which investors would have to say a polite no to. So in the end, instead of chasing investors, you finally have investors chasing you. And by the end of this short training video, you'll walk away with a clear idea of why investors were rejecting you and how you can change that today. We'll create a clear narrative which investors cannot ignore and a battle tested outreach strategy to ensure that the investors take you seriously when you reach out to them for fundraising purposes. And by the end of it, you can raise 25 lakh rupees to 5 CR without wasting months on cold DMs and rejections. This isn't about just being lucky, it's about being strategic. You don't need better metrics, you need better messaging. A new system from hustle to hope to structured fundraising system. Now, if you've ever felt like investors just don't get what you're building, or worse, that you're invisible, this will change it for you. So, the secret one to raise successful fundraising is that you don't need a large TAM to raise funding. Now, let's tackle the first myth that every founder hears. Why is your TAM so small? I'm sure this sounds familiar, right? And it crushed me for months as well, because people used to think diagnostics was a small industry. But here's what no one tells you. Investors aren't necessarily looking just for a large TAM. They are looking for signals, and a large TAM is just one of them. In fact, I've helped founders raise money with a very small TAM initially, with a very small market, but what they had instead was they had a very strong magnetic narrative and strategic proof points and game plan to expand their TAM in the future. You don't raise because you've already arrived. You raise because you've discovered a path which is worth betting on and which helps you to turn tiny wins into irresistible growth signals. Now, secret number two is you don't need to pitch to all investors. You need to only pitch to relevant investors. Now, the second myth which you might have heard is that you need to reach out to hundreds of investors to get funded, right? And sure, warm intros definitely help, but they are not always necessary. Most founders wait months trying to get any and every investor to try to listen to them. Meanwhile, the founders which I work with only pitch to a dozen targeted relevant investors and hopefully close one or two of them. We especially work with them hands-on to ensure that we find the right investors who can help them to raise capital and ensure the communication is far more targeted. This completely flips the script, and instead of chasing investors, you attract investors. You become the page which investors share in their WhatsApp groups instead of a pitch deck which is freely floating around in the market and essentially becomes completely devalued. Now, the secret is it's whom you reach out to, how you reach out to them, and how you tell your story. Now, definitely warm intros help over here, but the real important part is to figure out who are the relevant investors for your business. And finally, this one might sting, but your pitch deck is not your pitch. I've seen over-designed pitch decks raise absolutely nothing, and I've seen basic pitch decks with zero design raise crore rupees. Why? Because fundraising isn't just about slides. As I mentioned earlier, it's about positioning and reaching out to the right investors. The way you frame the opportunity, the way you make the investor feel early and align with their thesis. Inside the Fundraising Accelerator, we teach you how to structure and position your pitch, which makes the investor see themselves in your deck and see what an amazing opportunity it will be for the investor to make good returns on the business. And that is what makes them lean in. Secret number three is it's not just about the pitch deck, it's what the deck makes them feel. Now, here's what we've uncovered, right? You don't need a very large TAM, you need the right growth signals and the right opportunity for the investors. You don't need to randomly spray and pray. You need to reach out to relevant investors who make sense for your business. And the third point is you don't need a sexy deck. What you need is strategic positioning. You are just one narrative shift away from funding from something which is a completely a forgettable pitch deck or a forgettable pitch or a forgettable one of the thousands who reaches out to a VC to something which they are actively listening to and something which they cannot ignore. Now, if these three secrets shifted how you think about fundraising and you're thinking, damn, I wish someone had shown me this 6 months ago and I could have saved my time a lot more that way, I've got something for you. It's called the Startup Fundraising Accelerator. It is essentially a 4-week live program where I personally walk you through everything you need to raise capital, from strategy to outreach to negotiation. This won't have any fluff, any generic pitch decks, just a proven framework which will help you convert investors to your startup. And it has been used by founders to raise 25 lakh rupees, 50 lakh rupees, or even 2 CR rupees in debt or equity so that they have the fuel to run their business, even if you have never pitched to investors before. Now, the first option which we cover in the accelerator is the fundraising options, right? Most founders, they just obsess about equity funding in the hopes to get equity funding for the business because they think it is a cheap form of capital, something they don't have the pressure to repay, right? But equity funding is actually one of the most expensive forms of funding in the long run if you look at it, right? And only 2% of the total startups in India will truly qualify for equity funding. So if you do not fall in the remaining 2%, right, should you just wait and hope that you somehow get equity funding, or worse, not raise any funding at all? That would be a very difficult option to make. And rather, I suggest and advise how you can look at debt strategically as well to ensure that you have the right funds to ensure that you can grow your business. How you can strategically think about financing options for your business like leasing, NCD, CCPS, how you can do that strategically so that you can raise funds more effectively. Next, we do live pitch coaching calls for the next 4 weeks where we will sit together every week. We will shape your story, we will shape your deck and create the investor outreach for you live. Point number 3 is you will get pitch deck templates, which will essentially be plug and play templates for your pitch deck and DM scripts, which you can use from day one and start building your pitch deck which you need to start outreach with the investors. Now, point number 4 is legal terms, term sheets, and due diligence. Now, you definitely need to understand the legal terms which are involved in fundraising so the legal terms don't end up biting you in the ass when you're raising funds for your startup or end up hurting your startup. Because remember, equity funding comes with a lot of terms, a lot of conditions, and a lot of constraints. And if you do not know what each of those clauses in the term sheet are referring to, this could seriously damage your business. Point number 5 is investor and lender readiness. Your business needs to be ready for debt or equity investment so you can strategically raise funds instead of wasting time and effort in weak channels. If you're not investor ready, if you're not lender ready, you will not be able to raise funds, and that's what exactly will help you create to make it attractive to the investors. You can join the program with the link in the description below and in the comments below. Now you might be wondering, right, why the price is so low? Because I know how lonely and frustrating fundraising can feel. And I don't want price to be the reason that you give up. And this program isn't for random tourists or just someone who wants to come in for a session and see how it goes. This is for serious founders only who are ready to do the hard work, raise capital, and scale fast. Now we only take 10 founders per cohort, so you get more direct feedback from me and not random fluff. And seats are likely to fill up fast, so if you're even thinking about raising capital in the next 3 to 6 months, now is the time to apply below. Right now, you probably might be feeling one of two things, right? Part of you might be really excited. You know that this could be the thing that finally helps you raise capital to scale your business. But the part of you is still hesitant, wondering, what if I'm not ready yet? And that is a totally fair question. But here's the truth. No founder will ever feel 100% ready, because founders by default, they need to have a certain amount of imposter syndrome, because that is what is required to help you become bigger. But at the same time, do not let that imposter syndrome hold you back, because that is where it's extremely important to ensure that despite the imposter syndrome which makes you feel worried and scared about whether you can do it or not, at the same time it's there to help you improve as well. So do not miss out on the chance for improvement over here, because most of the ones which I've helped or even who raised independently by themselves, they weren't prepared either. They just had the right system and they started moving. So remember, don't let your fear hold you back. Now, another doubt you might be having is, can't I just raise later? You definitely can. But the best founders raise when they don't desperately need it. Why? Because urgency kills leverage. When you raise calmly, you can choose your investors, you can control the terms of the deal, and you can ensure that the negotiation is far more fruitful instead of begging or pleading investors to invest in your business. Now, the third doubt which you might be having is, what if I do this and still fail? But at least you'll fail strategically and not blindly. But most likely, you will definitely walk away with investor responses, feedback on your deck, feedback on your business, some tips and advice which you can use to grow your business, real data, and a clear next step. Because this isn't a gamble, it's a proven system that's worked across industries, cities, and traction levels. And even if you don't get equity, we can always help you raise debt funding to ensure that you can raise debt predictably and get that minimum fuel which is required to grow your business. Now imagine this, 3 months from now, you're pitching to investors with total clarity. You're getting replies from them, you're even getting meetings from them, maybe even multiple term sheets. Now, how would that change your startup's trajectory? Your confidence as a founder, your ability to hire, scale, and finally build without the weight of fundraising anxiety. That's what we are building inside the Fundraising Accelerator. Now, I'm not promising this will be easy because it's definitely not. In fact, fundraising is going to be one of the toughest things that you ever do. But what I am promising is that if you show up, you do the work, and you commit to the system, you won't be doing this alone. So click the link below in the description and in the comments. Apply now, because this fundraising accelerator will help you truly transform your business to grow your business. And this is the shot to figure out and understand how you can pitch the business and grow your business. Build, fund, scale. Looking forward to be a part of your fundraising journey inside. Take care.